But you've tuned in for 5 things not to do when installing a backsplash for a beginner. Now, if you stay away from these 5 tips, I believe it'll help your backsplash installation go really well. Woo! Tip number 1, trowel size. What's a trowel? This is an installation trowel for tile. It has ridges and notches in it. The size matters. You can see the difference in the two. When you're installing your mortar, you use a trowel that corresponds to the size of your tile. The smaller the tile, the smaller the ridges need to be. The larger the tile, the larger the ridges need to be. What that does is when applying the mortar or adhesive, it leaves the appropriate amount on the wall to have the tile set in. If you use a trowel that is too small, there will not be good transfer from the wall to your tile, and therefore you could have a failure. Always check the trowel size compared to the product you've purchased, and don't use a trowel that is too small. And now number 2, movement joints. I talk about movement joints a lot, but being in the business for over 22 years, that is the number 1 cause of failure that I've seen. Everything moves. Your tile is installed on a board. The board is installed on a wall, and this backsplash is adjacent to a countertop. Countertop sometimes will be on cabinets, which are installed on the floor. You get the idea. There's a whole thing that comes together, and everything moves. But everything moves at different rates. So a movement joint is critical for when that countertop is moving and the backsplash is not. It gives it some breathing room. That movement joint absorbs the expansion or contraction of the adjacent material. If you do not plan for your movement joints and you do not use your movement joints, your tile will crack, your grout will crack, and worst case, you could have a failure. For your backsplash to be successful, include movement joints. Number 3, choosing a material that is more advanced than your expertise. What does that mean? For instance, your son or daughter just got their driver's license, and on the way home, you give them a Formula 1 racing car to drive. You've supplied them with something that is more advanced than their experience. Similar in the tile industry, you have very advanced mortars, very advanced grouts, and if you are a beginner doing your backsplash, you don't want to get sucked into the qualities that those advanced materials have, because it could be detrimental to your installation. For example, if you use a high performance grout and you don't clean it correctly, it could dry on your tile installation and you may not be able to remove it without removing the tile. That is one thing you do not want to do when you're a beginner doing your backsplash. Choose materials that are simple and look great. A well installed simple installation looks 1,000 times better than a poorly installed sophisticated installation. Number 4, we always want to clean as I go, but do not clean too early. What does that mean? That means you need to follow the timing and the instructions that are on the products. For instance, when you're grouting, after you push your grout into the joints and you squeegee it off, the face of your tile is relatively clean, or should be. You do not want to take a bunch of water on a sponge and start cleaning it. That does a couple of different things. It washes the grout out of your joint, and so your joints become really low. And it also takes some of the pigments and latex and pulls it across the tile, which then dries on the tile and is difficult to remove. Number 4 is do not clean too early. And now number 5 on what not to do to have a successful backsplash installation for a beginner, your tile pattern. Now let's be honest, everybody loves a good herringbone pattern. But don't you remember, you hated geometry, right? That's what you're doing when you decide a herringbone pattern seems simple when you look at it, but when you start dealing with angles and corners and out of level countertops, it's going to be a nightmare. Choose a simple pattern, a stack bond, or a brick pattern. Remember, it's better to have a simple brick pattern or stack bond than a poorly executed herringbone pattern. So those are the 5 things not to do when installing a backsplash as a beginner. I'm your biggest cheerleader. Keep those things in mind when you're starting the process. Send me an email and let me know what project you're working on. I am here to serve the community. Ask me questions. Let me help you. And also help me click here and see me fumble through my laundry backsplash. And always keep learning and towel the world.